43 factory workers surrounded my car screaming, "Corporate scum," and threw eggs. My assistant was panicking, but I just smirked, drove to legal, and approved something that made their union rep regret ever letting them go that far. The first egg hit my windshield so hard it sounded like a gunshot. Then came another, and another. Yellow yolk smeared across the glass as 40-something factory workers surrounded my car, shouting and pelting it like they wanted to break through. They wore the same navy jumpsuits stamped Halpern Steelworks, but their faces, red, twisted, furious, were strangers to me now. Someone slammed a hand on my hood. Someone else screamed, "Corporate rat." "Go home," my pulse roared in my ears. My assistant, Noah, ducked in the passenger seat as another egg burst against his window. "Marla," he whispered, voice shaking, "this is insane. We have to call the police." I could see him trembling in the side mirror. I could also see him, Gage Torin, the union rep. Thick beard, gray eyes, arms crossed, standing just beyond the mob like he was directing an orchestra. Every throw, every curse, every chant, they all followed his rhythm. When he caught me staring, he smirked. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Egg was sliding down the glass in 6 streaks. The smell was sour and hot in the November air. "They can't do this," Noah hissed. "They're breaking the law." "They think I'm the enemy," I said quietly. He made sure of that. For a moment, I almost floored it, just to break free, but I forced myself to move slow, inch by inch through the wall of bodies. The crowd split reluctantly, still throwing, still cursing. When I finally hit the open road, my heart was hammering so hard I thought I'd be sick. Halpern Steelworks grew smaller in my mirror, but Gage's grin burned in my memory. "Where are we going?" Noah asked. "Not to the hotel," I said, turning away from town. "Then where?" "To the state legal office." "Now," he stared at me shell-shocked. "You're covered in egg, Marla. They won't take us seriously." "That's exactly why we're going," I said, my voice like steel. "They need to see what he's turned this into." He hesitated. "What are we even accusing him of?" I glanced at my hands, sticky, shaking, streaked with yellow. "We're not accusing him," I said. "We're proving him." The 20-minute drive into Springfield felt longer. By the time I parked, the egg had dried into crusty patches across my blazer. I didn't care. I wanted the lawyers to see every stain, every crack in my calm. When we stepped into the modest state building, the receptionist froze. "Miss, do you need?" "I need a conference room," I interrupted. "And I need someone who understands corporate sabotage and environmental law." Her eyes widened. "Environmental? Call whoever you have." Because Gage Torin thought humiliating me in front of his workers was victory. He had no idea I already knew what was buried in that factory, and that I was done playing nice. I turned to Noah, meeting his nervous eyes. "He made his move," I said quietly. "Now it's my turn. My name is Marla Dwyer, and for the past 9 years, I've been the person companies call when something's gone horribly wrong. Not the 'our profits are down' kind of wrong. The kind of wrong that stinks of cover-ups, hush money, and falsified reports. They call me a corporate fixer. But the truth, I'm just the one willing to walk into the mess everyone else pretends not to see. 3 weeks before the egg storm, I got a file dropped on my desk at headquarters in Chicago. Halpern Steelworks, site audit, urgent priority. Productivity was tanking. Safety violations were piling up. Workers were whispering about illnesses, chemical burns, and equipment failures. My job, find the root cause and clean it up. I should have known something was off when even my boss hesitated before handing me the file. "It's a small town," he'd said carefully. "They run things differently out there, don't stir them up too much." That was the first red flag. The second was Gage Torin. The union leader had been there for 15 years. Workers worshipped him. Management feared him. When I told Noah to dig into Gage's background, the look on his face said everything. "He's basically the mayor of Halpern Ridge," Noah said, sliding the folder over. "His brother runs the construction company, his cousin's the police chief, and his mother's the town clerk. Every contract, every inspection, every city approval goes through them." "Any dirt?" I asked. "Not yet. But everyone we've talked to says the same thing: you don't cross Gage Torin." I'd smiled at that. People love to say that, until they meet me. The first week at Halpern Steelworks was quiet, too quiet. Every time I entered the production floor, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Workers avoided eye contact. Supervisors became suddenly too busy for meetings. But I noticed the details. I always do. The burns on workers' hands that looked too severe to be from machinery. The strange smell in the east corridor that didn't match the factory's listed materials. And a locked storage room that wasn't on any official floor plan. When I asked about it, everyone had the same answer. Restricted maintenance zone. No one ever went in. By week 2, I started hearing the whispers about workers getting sick. About the doctor in town who quietly handed out asthma inhalers to people who'd never smoked. About a woman named Iris Vale who'd been fired after reporting chemical leaks to the state safety board. No one would talk to me directly until Cara Holden did. She worked line 6, inspecting metal sheets fresh out of the acid bath. Her hands shook constantly, her skin peppered with faint rashes. They told us the coolant's harmless, Cara said, glancing around the break room like someone might be listening. But it burns when it hits skin. My brother got nosebleeds every night before he quit. Fenton sorry Gage said not to make trouble. Did anyone test the materials? I asked. Her laugh was bitter. You think we can? The samples go to his nephew's lab. That was the third red flag and the biggest. Because when I checked the chemical shipment records, half of them didn't match the safety sheets at all. The factory was using banned solvents, rebranded and relabeled to look legitimate. Someone was deliberately poisoning people for profit. And the person signing every approval, Gage Torin, when I confronted the plant manager, he went pale. Don't do this, he said quietly. You don't know who you're dealing with. He was right. I didn't, not yet, but I was about to. The next day, I submitted a preliminary report to corporate, recommending an immediate shutdown pending safety investigation. By morning, a different version of my report started circulating among the workers, one that said I was recommending layoffs and factory relocation overseas. The signature was mine. The words were not. That's when the egg storm started. That's when I realized how far Gage would go to protect what he'd built and how dangerous it would be to take him down. The day after the attack, I walked back into Halpern Steelworks like nothing had happened. People stopped what they were doing, whispering, staring. A few even spat near my feet as I passed. Let them. I wasn't there to win hearts. I was there to bury lies. Noah trailed behind me, pale and jittery, clutching his clipboard like a shield. Marla, they hate you. You shouldn't even be here without security. I don't need security, I said. I need answers. By then, I'd already traced the shipments. The banned chemicals were coming in under falsified product codes, routed through a supplier called Ravon Distribution, registered to an address that didn't exist, except the tax records listed the owner's name. Tessa Torin, Gage's sister. That was the first thread I pulled. The second came from Cara, the worker with the rashes. She'd messaged me late that night from a burner phone. If you want proof, check the old maintenance wing after midnight. But come alone. It sounded like a setup, but I went anyway. I always do. The maintenance wing had been sealed off for repairs for over a year. The air was thick with metallic dust and something sharper, chemical, acidic. Noah had insisted on coming, though he stayed by the door, flashlight trembling. Jesus, it stinks in here, he muttered. Keep it down. I crouched beside a row of drums stacked against the far wall. The paint was peeling off one of them, revealing what looked like a corroded warning label beneath a coat of gray. I scraped it with my nail until the words bled through. Toxic, industrial solvent. Prohibited domestic use. I photographed everything. Every serial number, every barrel, every falsified label. But the real shock came when I followed the pipes running from the barrels. They didn't lead to the main water filtration system. They split off 2 directions. One line went toward the production floor, the other up and east, toward the executive offices. Except the one heading to the offices had a filter system attached, pristine and new. The one to the workers' section, rusted, corroded, and cracked. I felt my stomach drop. 2 water systems, I whispered. One for them, one for everyone else. Noah looked at me, horrified. So the workers have been drinking poison? Bathing in it, eating near it, breathing it. Before we could leave, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. I killed the flashlight. Someone was coming. We ducked behind the storage racks as the door opened. Through the sliver of light, I saw Gage step in, phone to his ear. "Yeah, tell them to destroy the manifests," he was saying. "If corporate starts asking about the coolant composition, say the lab misplaced the original results. And make sure the new batch arrives before Friday. I don't care what it costs." He stopped, turning slowly like he sensed something. His eyes scanned the darkness. I held my breath. Then he smiled to himself and said into the phone, "She'll be gone by next week anyway." When the door closed and his footsteps faded, Noah exhaled shakily. He knows we're digging." "Good," I said. "That means he's scared." But as we slipped out the back exit, something on the floor caught my eye, a small silver flash beneath a drain grate. I crouched down and pulled it free. A key, stamped with a number, 17B. I didn't know it then, but that key would unlock far more than a door. The next morning, corporate called. Officially, they were reviewing my conduct for unauthorized activity. Unofficially, Gage had gotten to them too. Noah slammed the phone down after they hung up. "They're buying his story. They think you're trying to shut down the plant for profit." I just smiled. "Then we'll need to stop asking questions and start collecting proof." That night, I returned to the maintenance wing alone, key 17B in my pocket, and something burning under my skin that felt a lot like rage. I went back into Halpern Steelworks at 2:14 am security rotation, changed at 2:10. I'd memorized their routes, their breaks, and the blind spots in the camera coverage. You don't survive this job without learning how to disappear. Key 17B glinted in my palm under the flashlight. I followed the pipeline from the chemical drums to the east corridor, where the air felt colder and cleaner, unnaturally so. The door marked Storage 17B Restricted Access sat behind 2 layers of chain lock and a keypad that looked like it hadn't been used in years. But the key slid in perfectly. The moment the door opened, I knew this wasn't storage. It was a lab, rows of stainless steel counters, digital testing kits, chemical samples labeled with aliases like Coolant A3 and Solvent 9X, and folders, dozens of them lined up neatly on a table, each stamped with worker names. Cara Holden, Marcus Evers, Iris Vale. I opened one. Inside were blood test results. Every single one flagged for elevated solvent exposure levels. I recognized some of the values from industrial toxicity charts, levels that could cause neurological damage, infertility, cancer. The pages were signed off by a Dr. Wilmer Hoyt, the factory's on-site medical contractor. Except the final sheet in each folder had a typed note at the bottom: "No action required. Cause likely non-occupational." My throat tightened. Every worker who'd complained of illness had been tested, documented, and silenced. A sudden sound made me flinch, a door closing somewhere down the hall. I cut my light. Footsteps, slow, careful, getting closer. I slipped behind a counter just as the lab door opened. A flashlight beam cut through the room. 2 figures entered. One I didn't recognize, tall, heavyset, dressed in maintenance gray. The other made my stomach drop. Noah, my Noah. He looked nervous, eyes darting everywhere. The other man handed him a folder. "Mr. Torrin said to burn these," the man said. "Every record with a red tag." Noah nodded. "Understood." I stayed perfectly still, heart hammering. They set up a small steel bin and poured solvent into it. The man struck a match and handed it to Noah. Noah hesitated. His hand trembled. Then he dropped the match. The first file burned Iris Vales. That was the moment I realized Noah wasn't just scared, he'd switched sides. When they left, I waited until the smell of smoke cleared, then slipped out. I followed them at a distance, through the side door into the cold night. Outside, Gage Torrin was waiting. He looked relaxed, almost smug. He clapped Noah on the shoulder. "Good work," he said. "We'll get you set up properly after this blows over." Noah nodded. "I didn't want to," Gage laughed. "You wanted a future, you made the smart choice." I didn't move, I didn't breathe. They drove off together in a black pickup. I stood in the shadows until the sound of the engine faded, every muscle in my body trembling. When I finally got back to the motel, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the dark window. The one person I trusted had sold me out. The files that could have exposed Gage were burning in an oil drum by now. But what Gage didn't know, what Noah didn't know, was that I'd already scanned every single document the night before. And what I'd found in those files went far beyond the factory. There was a name on the distribution invoices, one I recognized from a completely different corporation, halfway across the country. Someone else was funding this. Someone higher up. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, because I refused to. By sunrise, I had every piece of evidence spread across the motel bed. Scanned reports, chemical manifests, employee test results, burn photos. And the one document that mattered most, a distribution ledger signed not just by Gage Torin, but by someone named Eleanor Brandt. Eleanor Brandt was the regional vice president for Vierks Industries, one of Halpern Steelworks' biggest suppliers. Which meant the poison running through the factory wasn't just Gage's doing. It was part of a supply chain cover-up stretching straight into corporate headquarters. And now, I had proof. I called the only person left I could trust, Clive Mercer, an old contact from the State Environmental Division. Clive owed me a favor. I'd once stopped a CEO from burying his audit career. He picked up on the first ring. "You sound like someone sitting on a bomb," he said. "I am," I replied, "and I need you to light it." He didn't ask for details, he never did, just said, "Meet me tomorrow." Quiet place. That gave me one night to plan how to bring Gage down without losing everything. By noon, I went back to the factory under the guise of reviewing safety procedures. No one stopped me. They all looked away. The shame had started to seep in, thin cracks forming in Gage's control. Kara caught me in the hallway when no one was watching. Her hands were shaking. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "He knows you found the lab." "How?" I asked. She looked terrified. "Noah told him you took something." I felt my chest tighten. "What else did he say?" "That you're working with outsiders, that you're trying to shut the place down for good." I smiled, small and sharp. "Then we'll let him think that. Because sometimes the best way to win is to make your enemy believe they've already beaten you." That night, I sent an anonymous tip to the Halpern Ridge Gazette, the local paper Gage controlled through his cousin. I made sure it looked sloppy, half-truths, missing context, and a hint of paranoia, enough to make Gage panic. It worked. By the next morning, the factory buzzed with rumors. "Feds are coming," someone whispered. "Gage's been selling materials under the table." He called an emergency meeting for that afternoon. I knew what that meant: damage control. He'd want to make an example out of me again. Good. Noah tried to reach me that morning. 3 missed calls, 1 voicemail. "Marla, please, we need to talk. I didn't have a choice." I deleted it without listening further. Choices always exist. When I met Clive later that morning, I handed him a drive loaded with every document I'd pulled. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, flipping through files. "If even half of this is real, they're done, both of them." "It's real," I said, "but I need you to hold off releasing it until I give the word." "Why?" "Because I want to see their faces when they realize what I've done." I spent the rest of that day preparing for the meeting, rehearsing, not words, but silence. Because I wasn't going to defend myself this time. I was going to let them hang themselves with their own lies. When the clock hit noon, I stood in front of the mirror in the motel bathroom, hair slicked back, suit pressed, no trace of fear left. I whispered to my reflection, "You started this war, Gage. Now let's see how you finish it." I grabbed the drive's duplicate, slipped it into my coat pocket, and walked out the door. Outside, rain had started to fall, thin, cold, relentless. It felt fitting, because storms don't destroy what's strong. They just expose what's weak. And by the end of the day, everyone at Halpern Steelworks would know exactly who was rotting beneath the surface. The meeting was held in the factory's main assembly hall. Same stage where they'd booed me 2 weeks ago. Same echo of rage in the air, but quieter this time. They weren't sure what to believe anymore. Gage Torin stood front and center, dressed in his spotless navy jacket, microphone in hand. His eyes found mine the second I entered. That smirk again. "Well, well," he said into the mic. "Looks like our corporate crusader came back for another sermon." The workers laughed, but it sounded hollow now. I didn't respond. I just took my seat in the front row, folder in my lap, drive in my pocket. Let him perform. Behind him on stage stood Noah, pale as paper, refusing to meet my eyes. And next to him, someone new. A woman in a gray suit, hair tight, smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Before we begin," Gage said, gesturing grandly, "I want to welcome a very special guest. Someone who actually cares about this factory's future, our regional vice president, Eleanor Brandt." My heart skipped. Eleanor Brandt. The name on the ledger, the ghost behind the curtain. She stepped up to the mic with the confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no. "Thank you, Gage," she said smoothly. "It's tragic what's happened here. Miscommunication, misinformation, all because certain individuals decided to act outside proper channels." Her eyes flicked toward me for only half a second, but it was enough. She knew exactly who I was. Gage handed her a folder. "We've already gathered evidence proving that Miss Dwyer falsified safety data and tampered with lab results." The crowd murmured. I stayed still. Then Alina opened the folder and froze, because inside wasn't what she expected. Instead of fake evidence, every page was stamped confidential. VIREX internal test REPORTS. The very same documents linking her to the illegal chemical imports. Her smile didn't falter, but her knuckles whitened. Gage frowned. "What's wrong? Where did you get these?" she asked quietly. "They were in the restricted lab," he said. "I thought," her voice cut like glass, "you weren't supposed to keep these." The room went still. And then, for the first time since I'd met him, Gage Torin looked confused. "Alina, you told me—" "I told you to follow instructions," she snapped. "Not to start waving evidence around in public." That's when it clicked. Gage wasn't the mastermind. He was the puppet. The entire factory scheme, the dual water systems, the forged reports, the kickbacks, it wasn't Gage's design. It was hers. I'd spent weeks preparing to destroy a man who was just the middle link in a much larger chain. Alina turned back to the crowd, mask slipping back into place. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said smoothly. "Let's all calm down." But Gage wasn't calming down. His voice rose, raw and angry. "You said they'd never trace it back to me. You said the chemicals were safe." The workers murmured louder. Someone shouted, "What's she talking about?" Alina's expression hardened. "That's enough, Gage." He took a step toward her. "You used me. You let them think this was my operation while you funneled the profits upstairs." Alina's voice dropped to a whisper, but I caught every word. "You were always expendable." Gage lunged. Security rushed in. Chaos erupted. While everyone's attention was locked on the struggle, I stood and walked quietly to the side exit, pulling the small voice recorder from my pocket. It had captured everything. Every confession, every slip, every threat. Noah appeared beside me, trembling. "Marla, we have to go, this is spiraling." "I know," I said. "That's the point." As we reached the hallway, I stopped. "You knew about her, didn't you?" Noah's silence was answer enough. "You weren't just feeding Gage," I said softly. "You were feeding her." He swallowed hard. "She told me she'd ruin my career if I didn't cooperate. I thought I could keep you safe if I played both sides." I almost laughed. "You're lucky I'm too tired to hate you right now." Back inside, voices were shouting, people scattering. Gage had broken free and was yelling about exposure, about betrayal, about everyone being poisoned. Alina was trying to calm him, but the workers had already heard too much. I pressed a button on the recorder, syncing it to the cloud. Clive would get the file within the hour. Then I turned back to Noah. "Get ready," I said. "Because when this goes public, it's not just Gage or Alina going down, it's everyone who signed off on those shipments." He looked terrified. "That's half the division. Then half the division falls." Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Inside, Gage screamed Alina's name like a curse. And for the first time since I'd arrived in Halpern Ridge, I realized this wasn't just a fight for justice anymore. It was a war between the guilty, and I was right in the middle. The factory was chaos after that meeting. Workers shouting, cops arriving, management running for cover. Gage Torin was dragged off the stage, still screaming Alina Brandt's name like it was poison. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I had something more important to do. I needed to know why. Why Alina, a woman already at the top, would risk everything for a scheme this vile. It took 2 days to find out. By the time I reached Chicago, Alina had already vanished from her office at Vierk's headquarters. HR called it an unexpected leave of absence. I called it what it was, running. But people who run always leave something behind. Her assistant, a woman named Lydia, met me at a cafe 2 blocks away. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. "I shouldn't be talking to you," she said quietly. "They said not to." They, legal, corporate, everyone. "They said if I mention anything about the Halpern shipments, I could be charged too." "Then you already know something," I said. Lydia hesitated, then slid a flash drive across the table. "She kept backups, not in the company servers." Personal backups, I don't even think she remembered I helped her set them up. What's on it? Her eyes filled with something like guilt. Memos, audio files, and one video. You'll understand when you see it. I went back to my hotel, locked the door, and loaded the drive. The first file was an audio recording. Eleanor's voice, clipped and confident. Phase 2 begins once exposure levels reach threshold. The medical data will validate our synthetic filtration claims. My stomach turned. Exposure levels, validate. She hadn't just been covering up contamination, she'd been testing it. I opened the next file, a series of emails. The subject line made my blood run cold. Project Sierra trial results. Halpern Ridge. Vierx hadn't been trying to save money. They'd been running an illegal biomedical trial using the factory's water system as a live test environment. Workers weren't victims of negligence, they were test subjects. I clicked the final file. A video opened. Eleanor sat in a private conference room, camera angled from above. She was speaking to someone off-screen. The factory population is ideal, isolated, financially dependent, and medically unmonitored. Controlled exposure will allow us to model long-term solvent effects and prototype the filtration compound for commercial rollout. There was a pause. The voice off-screen said, "And the workers," Eleanor smiled. "They'll be compensated indirectly. Job security, wages, stability, the best reward for people like that is ignorance." I slammed the laptop shut. For a long time I just sat there, shaking. I'd seen greed before, I'd seen cruelty. But this was something else. This was cold science weaponized as business. She hadn't cared about profit. She cared about data. The suffering in Halpern Ridge wasn't an accident, it was a controlled experiment. That was her motive. That was her reason. She built an empire on poison and called it progress. And as much as I wanted to expose her, I realized something worse. If she'd done it once, she'd do it again. Vierx had other plants. Other trial sites. And if I didn't stop her now, there'd be more Halpern Ridges, more families coughing blood into their sink drains. I picked up the phone and called Clive. "Start drafting the warrants," I said. He hesitated. "You found something big, didn't you?" I stared out the hotel window at the rain, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles ached. "Bigger than both of us," I said, "and it's not over. Not until she feels what they felt." I didn't sleep for 3 days after watching that video. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kara's blistered hands, Marcus's cough. The way the workers looked at me that first day, angry, afraid, desperate. Eleanor Brandt had done that. She had calculated that. So I stopped thinking like an investigator and started thinking like her. Cold, strategic, patient. If I wanted to destroy her, I couldn't rely on the system she owned. I had to make her destroy herself. It began with a leak. Not a big one, just a few pages of Vierx. Project Sierra documents sent anonymously to a small investigative blog known for biting the hands that fed it. Clive made sure it looked like an internal whistleblower. Within hours, it hit social media. Within 12, local news. Within 24, national coverage. Major manufacturing firm linked to human exposure trials. Vierx scrambled to issue statements denying involvement. But that was the beauty of it. Eleanor couldn't claim ignorance without admitting she'd known what was going on. Then came the second phase. I sent a package to every board member at Vierx. Inside, a copy of Eleanor's recorded meeting, the one where she called the workers ideal test subjects. I didn't send it through email. I sent hard drives, personal couriers. No deniability, no digital trail to erase. By the next morning, half the board had gone silent. The other half was calling for Eleanor's resignation. She didn't resign. She doubled down. She went on television, tried to spin it as a smear campaign from a disgruntled employee with falsified data. She even mentioned me by name. That was the last mistake she ever made. Because at the same time her interview aired, I released everything. The full Project Sierra archive, the ledgers, the forged safety reports, the internal memos showing she'd used multiple factories as test zones. And then, my favorite part, I attached the video of Gage Torrens screaming at her in the assembly hall. The line where she said, "You were always expendable." The internet did the rest. By nightfall, Project Sierra was trending worldwide. Vyerk stock crashed 38% in 12 hours. Federal investigators raided the company's Chicago headquarters the next morning. Clive called me from the scene. "They've got her," he said. "She tried to shred files, but it's over. The DOJ's taking full custody." For a long time, I didn't say anything. Then I just whispered, "Good." 2 weeks later, Gage Torin pleaded guilty to conspiracy and evidence tampering in exchange for testimony. He tried to paint himself as a victim. It didn't work. Alina Brandt, though she didn't plead, she fought. She stood in front of the cameras and said, "Innovation requires sacrifice." When the verdict came down, 20 years without parole, the courtroom went dead silent. Halpern Steelworks was shut down for 6 months. When it reopened, it was under new ownership. The first thing they did was rename it the Vale Plant, in honor of Iris Vale, the woman who tried to warn everyone before she was silenced. Every worker got lifetime medical coverage, funded directly from Vyerk's frozen assets. And when the first checks arrived, Kara called me crying. "You did it," she said. "You made her pay." But I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. Revenge isn't clean. It doesn't bring peace. It just ends the noise. Still, one thing stayed with me. The day after the verdict, a courier showed up at my office with an unmarked envelope. Inside was a photo, grainy, black and white, of a research facility on the outskirts of Detroit. On the back, someone had written, "This was Phase 2. She wasn't working alone." I burned the photo, but I didn't forget it, because some things don't end. They just go quiet until you're ready to hear them again. On my office wall, next to my degrees and certifications, hangs a small glass frame. Inside it, a single dried eggshell, a reminder of where it all began, and of how sometimes the people who throw stones or eggs aren't your enemies. They're the evidence you were meant to find.